Hey, good afternoon. Thank you to the members of the committee for allowing me to submit this video presentation for the chapter that I submitted for the Research and Creative Activity Award for the College of Education and Human Services. Unfortunately, I'm not able to be with you in person today. When the call for submissions came out and I saw the April 6th date, unfortunately, I already had something else scheduled. So again, thank you for this opportunity to share my work with you. So the chapter that I've submitted is using gamification to engage higher order thinking skills. And this is a forthcoming work that is coming out in a handbook of research on promoting high order skills and global competencies in life and work, being published by IGI Global Publishing. So in this video, I want to just give some background on the chapter, not only the purpose of the chapter, but some of the background on what led me to write it. And then kind of go through the major sections of the chapter, which are an overview of high order thinking, some approaches to gamification, efforts to connect gamification to high order thinking, which is really what the chapter is all about, and then provide some recommendations for practice, and those are focused on faculty and higher education settings. Look at some potential avenues for future research, and then wrap up this video. So what led me to write this chapter were really my own experiences with gamification. I first set out to really gamify a course in 2011 when I taught an online course related to the organization and administration of higher education. And at that time, there was an online game. It wasn't online. It was downloadable called Virtual U, and I framed the course around that game. So through connecting various game elements within the game, various tasks to course readings and other course assignments, students moved through the game in order to work toward a certain strategy and deal with different institutional crises as they arise in the game. And so it's all about manipulating variables to really try to figure out how different pieces interrelate within higher education settings. And so that was my first experience with gamification as a faculty member. This past year, in the spring of 2017, I decided I was going to revisit a full course gamification effort, and unfortunately that Virtual U program is no longer supported, and in fact doesn't run very well on current Windows machines and doesn't run at all on Mac or Chrome OS. So there's some issues with using that. So I created my own game simulation, if you will. And it was all structured around, there's a fictional institution, and as students progress through the course or the game, depending on how we want to think about it, they uncovered more information about the institution, and then as they completed the assigned readings and went through the assignments, they're putting together pieces and working toward an ultimate goal of the game, which was an ultimate goal of the course. And so that's what got me. Those are the things that I've done with gamification. And I saw a call for chapters for this book, and I thought, wow, I think I've got something to share about gamification based on my experiences. And then thinking about this feedback that I've received from students about those gamified experiences. But I've also used games in other ways in my teaching over the years. And so I have these different experiences that come together, and I wanted to share them, and I want to share them in a formal setting. And so this chapter provided a great vehicle to do that. And so now, okay, that's my background. Now to the nitty-gritty of the book chapter. So I think to set the stage for everything, one, it's important to note and to remember that gamification isn't just about a fun thing to do. It's like, oh, we're going to play a game. That's so fun. Gamification is, I'll share in some other portions of this video, is a vehicle to help students connect to the content in some different ways. It's a way to provide different approaches to motivation that we likely don't get through didactic learning approaches. And also, gamification isn't just some sort of novel approach to teaching. Something I note in the chapter is that really gamification is about experiential learning, And really, at its foundation, that this isn't something new. John Dewey was talking about and writing about the importance of experiential learning as a motivator for students in the early 20th century. So gamification, yeah, it seems like it's something shiny and new, and there are lots of bells and whistles that are possible, but at its roots, it's about experiential learning. And through that connection to experiential learning is where we see that there's this great potential to promote higher order thinking. And so higher order thinking is really all about students' ability to integrate their existing knowledge in order to find solutions and develop solutions. It's not, find is probably the wrong verb there. So if we think about Bloom's taxonomy, it's not about finding information or building, simply stacking information on top of each other. It's about analyzing and creating. So they're integrating existing knowledge that they already have with new knowledge that they discover and synthesize and create unique solutions to perplexing situations. And so higher order thinking then represents a key to unlocking deep learning. And deep learning is that space where students are really able to dig in. And so I think I like the metaphor of digging in when it comes to deep learning, because I think about digging a hole. And the deeper we go, well, so digging a hole to build a house. The deeper we go, the stronger the foundation for our house can become. And I think that when we help students engage in deep learning, which is a quintessential part of higher order thinking, that's when we see students who are able to kind of move past that piece of, I'm just trying to do what you're asking for, or just tell me what you want in this paper. They move from that, and then when they're engaged in deep learning, they're able to see, okay, here are the minimum requirements for this paper. I get that. But I really want to learn about X, Y, and Z. Or I want to really critically examine these connections between these two potentially disparate areas or concepts. And so gamification can provide some of that push to help students unlock that deep learning. Through high order thinking, we also see that higher order learning is facilitated through communication. And so in the chapter, I talk about this idea of cognitive presence, that higher order thinking is promoted and fostered not only when students are provided spaces to connect with each other in meaningful ways and communicate in meaningful ways, but when they're really present with each other. And this can happen in face-to-face courses, hybrid courses, and online courses. So I think we often think about connection as being some sort of face-to-face, I look in your eyes, and we develop a connection as we interact with each other. But we also have to recognize that communication takes many forms and takes place in many platforms. And that cognitive presence shows up really when students engage with each other in deep learning. So these things are connected and interlocking and overlapping with each other. And all of this is further facilitated and made further possible through engagement. And I think we throw this term engagement around a lot in higher education, and certainly in my field of higher education practice, higher education administration practice, we definitely talk about engagement a lot, and it's one of our buzzwords in our field of practice. But when we think about the way that engagement is framed in the literature, we understand that engagement is about the time and effort that individuals invest in educationally purposeful activities, but also the way that institutions leverage resources so that students can benefit from a wide array of learning opportunities. And we know from research that engagement matters, and one of the key areas that's labeled a high impact practice. So one of these key areas that's a high impact practice that can impact student success are meaningful connections between students and then also meaningful connections between student and faculty. And so all of these things are really important pieces of higher order thinking, that it's not just within the individual and their motivations, although that's part of it, and their efforts, but we have to see that we as faculty play really critical roles in promoting students' higher order thinking. And so I set that groundwork in order to then dig into gamification. And so gamification is all about using game-based elements to help individuals motivate toward taking action. It helps motivate, to promote learning and solve problems. And another way to think about gamification, and so I have a colleague in the student affairs realm who likes to make the point that gamification is really about taking something that was not intended to be a game and trying to make it into a gamed experience. And so as we think about how do we do that, how do we take these game design elements to take a course that was never intended to be a game and give it that game feel and a game experience. So there are a number of different ways to go about this and considerations to make. And so I just want to kind of skim through a couple of these. And one is, in the chapter I make the distinction between digital games, and that's where my experience has been for fully gamified courses, versus what we might consider tabletop games. And so an example of using a tabletop game in a course is I'll bring in Monopoly into my class because it's something the students are familiar with, but then I'll put some twists on Monopoly. And so we might use Monopoly to demonstrate for state-supported institutions how it almost feels as though there are elements of chance at play. But then, so let's say that I'm a game piece that represents Murray State University, and I'm moving around the board, I land on a railroad. Well, in Monopoly, that's usually a good thing when you own that railroad, but landing on that railroad ends up being a 5% tax or a 5% appropriations cut. And so there are ways that we can take tabletop games and manipulate them a little bit, or even develop our own tabletop games. So we're bringing in some gamed element into a class. We also have ways when we're thinking about particularly a fully gamified course, or maybe there's a simulation. And so we can take a linear or nonlinear approach. A linear is moving through the game from point A to point B to point C. So it's almost like if you're familiar with video games, playing Super Mario Brothers. You move from world to world to world, go from stage to stage to stage. And you're trying to go through and defeat the bad guys and ultimately rescue Princess Peach. Well, then a nonlinear approach could be something like Minecraft, where not only does the player build the world, but there are a wide array of options to go about working to achieve the desired outcome of the game. And so it's very nonlinear, it's very player-centric in terms of the way that choices are made to go through the game. And then also, one of the key pieces that I touch on when it comes to game design in the chapter is that there are aesthetic considerations that come into play. And so if I'm designing a fully gamified course and it's an online course, I have to make some choices. Okay, do I really focus on, so this is what I did in the spring of 17. I developed a couple of graphic images to have some consistent look and feel of pieces that I shared with students, but I didn't really try to make an online immersive game experience. I'm not a game designer. I'm a faculty member. My expertise is in higher education, not in game design. But there's still some aesthetic considerations that we can take into account. And aesthetics is about the look and feel. So we often focus on those visual components when it comes to aesthetics, but part of aesthetics is also the gaming experience itself. So what does it feel like to move through the experience? Are students able to discover the pieces that they need easily? Or are they finding that they're really struggling with the interface? And so in my case, the interface was Canvas, our learning management system. So did I have things in ways where students could get to those pieces easily? Could they navigate the course, which was also a factor of navigating the game without big issues? And then there are potential hazards when it comes to approaching gamification. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of effort on the part of the faculty member to gamify a course. It doesn't matter if it's online, hybrid, or face-to-face. The faculty member has to take a lot of pieces into consideration. And another hazard is that not everything that looks like a game is really gamification or even game-based play. So an example that a friend of mine likes to use is, just because I renamed the grading system into earning coins, well, if you need 1,000 coins to get an A, but then last semester you needed 1,000 points to get an A, I've just turned points into coins. I've not modified the course into a gamed experience. So just because we use some of that lingo doesn't mean it's gamification. And also a potential hazard is, as I mentioned, gamification is definitely becoming like the new shiny thing that's getting more attention, particularly when we talk about online teaching and learning. But gamification should not be looked at as some sort of end-all, be-all of teaching. So now I want to get to the part in the chapter where I make those connections between gamification and higher order thinking. Games can be great motivators. If a student is motivated by those external things, so like badges, or okay, if I get to X number of, or if I complete X number of missions in the game, I get to unlock something extra. Those can be wonderful motivators. But also there's the intrinsic motivation that can come from self-efficacy. And so self-efficacy is that the belief that students have as a result, have that they can complete something, can complete a task, and that belief generally comes from having completed something similar to it, or they complete a task and they say, oh, okay, I did that, I believe that I can do the next one. So even if we scaffold learning experiences to help students move from simplicity to complexity, if we do our job right as faculty, like we would do in a non-gamified course, then we're helping students develop and increase their self-efficacy. Games can really help promote problem solving. Problem-based learning was a big rage within education across all levels for quite some time. And it's still a very popular concept to talk about and to approach. And games can be a really wonderful way to promote problem solving and problem-based learning, because it can be approached as an immersive experience. So a student assumes a role in a particular scenario, and that in order to move the scenario, they really have to picture themselves in that role and solve problems based on the role that they play in that gamed experience. And likewise, games can enhance creativity and innovation. If students are assuming a role, one of the things that can happen is that they're not coming into that experience with preconceived notions. If they really immerse themselves in, okay, I am in this role, within this game, I am the director of student services at this institution. And I don't have that experience previously. I've not been a director of student services, but here's what I understand about that role. And so here are the things that I think I would do in that space. Or here's an idea that I don't know if this has been done before, but I think in this game, I'm allowed to take risks because it's a game. And so that risk taking can really help students engage creativity and approaching innovative solutions to problems. And also games, when they're structured to do so, can really be vehicles for collaborative and cooperative learning. That even if a student is instructed to approach a game individually, we can design points in the game where students have to come together and collaborate and cooperate in order to advance. So some recommendations for faculty to engage gamification in their teaching practice. Number one is just do it. take a leap of faith. Either say, in this class session, this class module, I'm going to engage a gamification effort. I'm going to bring in some game-based play. But when doing so, ensure the time on task is connected to meaningful learning, because students can sniff out busy work before they can do anything else. So we have to make sure that the gamed elements are not just a way to make busy work seem fun. So that means we need to make sure that we're not just having busy work in our classes. We have to make sure that with a gamified experience that there's proper feedback, that students aren't going through the game and completing all the steps without any feedback from the faculty member. And that one of the best ways to really understand how to approach games and how to approach gamification in our teaching, we should play games too. Folks who write about game-based play and gamification, and I cite them throughout my chapter, this is one of the key things that all of them say in their articles, books, and chapters, is that if you want to really understand gamification and understand how to approach it, don't just read about gamification. That's an important part, but play games too. Be a game player. And some suggestions for future research is that we need to look at gamification implementation in face-to-face versus online courses. And so that could involve trying to discern, are students learning at the same level through a gamified course when it's face-to-face versus it being online? We need to empirically test these links that I suggest exist between gamification and higher order thinking. That research is yet to be done. And then we also need to look at faculty motivations and or traits among those who choose to approach gamification or game-based learning. I came across a lot of literature and a lot of research about student motivations to engage in game-based learning and gamified courses, but very little about what motivates faculty to approach game-based learning in their courses. And so in conclusion, there's so many opportunities when it comes to gamification, not only for students, but us as faculty as well. And there's no one-size-fits-all method for gamification, and it definitely represents a wide range of approaches. And in the end, as I started off with, gamification is about using game elements to enhance student learning experiences. It's about taking something that was never intended to be a game and turning it into a gamed experience. So again, thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to having conversations with each of you in the future about gamification, and I'm always happy to sit down and brainstorm any ideas. Thank you.